For today's episode, we're going to talk about one of my favorite franchises of all time, Earthworm Jim. So a lot of people always wonder, which version should I get, the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis when they buy it? Well, I'm going to tell you today because I happen to own both versions and, well, one's good and one's not so good. Let's find out. So a lot of people wonder, why do I like Earthworm Jim? Well, it's a funny game. I mean, there's just something funny about a guy who's a giant earthworm in a super suit blowing stuff up. There's a lot of humor in the game. You can tell this game's going to be funny just by opening the manual and seeing the way the opening story is presented in a comic book fashion with the characters looking all goofy. But between the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis version, I think I'd have to say that the Sega Genesis version is better. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but it's just true. The second to last level from the Sega Genesis version is cut out from the Super Nintendo, and the sound bites are a lot better on the Sega Genesis version because he says other stuff. He says plasma when he gets a plasma gun, and in the Super Nintendo they cut out a lot of those sound bites. And even though the graphics aren't as good on the Sega Genesis as on the Super Nintendo, and the music may not sound as good, it still has some pretty funky beats. And then you have the Super Nintendo version, which does look nicer and it does sound nicer, but according to some people, the Super Nintendo version sounds a bit muffled when it comes to the music. As you can tell, the sun in this version has some weird cool effect that when it goes behind the background, it gets brighter or dimmer. I thought it sounded great. My only problem is, like I mentioned, that there's no sound clips for certain actions. And a lot of his standstill animations were removed, like Earthworm Jim singing isn't in the Super Nintendo version. Overall, it's a good game. It's just, if you have the option between the Sega Genesis version and the Super Nintendo version, stick with Sega. You'll always hear somebody mention that the best version of Earthworm Jim is the one on Sega CD or the PC. The PC version really is the best version of Earthworm Jim. The music's better, the graphics are better, the sound bites are better, everything's better. And it's actually really cheap. The price tag says $10, but I only paid like $5, and I see this on eBay all the time for like $5, $6, $7. For some strange reason, the PC version is a lot cheaper. Now the Sega CD version might be a little pricier because I'm pretty sure Sega CD, everything is rare on that thing. Kinda. Now I know there's Earthworm Jim HD, but I've played the demo. I've got no interest in picking it up. Speaking of Earthworm Jim HD, there's an Earthworm Jim app for the iPhone and iPod, but the controls stink. The only thing that's good about it is the graphics, because the music's no upgrade. It's okay. So that finally brings me to the last version of Earthworm Jim that unfortunately I happen to own. I know there's the Game Gear version, I know there's the Game Boy version, but I prefer those over the Game Boy Advance version. Now, this was literally the first Earthworm Jim game I ever bought. The gameplay is slow and terrible. And Jim sounds like an idiot. Strangely enough, the sun is like in the Super Nintendo version. So it looks like this is a port of the Super Nintendo version, but it includes the level that was cut out from the Sega Genesis version, that was cut out from the Super Nintendo. So it's like a hybrid, but unfortunately instead of being the best of both worlds, it ended up being the worst of both worlds. Yeah, don't even bother picking this one up. Go with the iPhone one. Man, I've just about Earthworm Jim pooped myself out. Well, there's a sequel. Yeah, after all these different versions of the same game, you think, dang, now there's a sequel, and imagine how many different versions there's gonna be of that one. Well, fortunately for me, the answer was more condensed this time. The best version I prefer was the Super Nintendo version. So yeah, there's the Super Nintendo version of Earthworm Jim 2, Sega Genesis version, Game Boy Advance version, Sega Saturn version, and PlayStation 1 version. Now, I know the PlayStation 1 version and the Sega Saturn version are the best, but I've never seen the PS1 version, and the Sega Saturn version is probably going to be rare, and the Game Boy Advance version still sucks. The Sega Genesis version, how did that turn out? Well, this time it's the complete opposite. The sound for the Sega Genesis version isn't as good as the Super Nintendo version. Now unfortunately I can't show you examples this time because I only own the Super Nintendo version. If you only have a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis, get the Super Nintendo version. So you think by this point I'm done talking about Earthworm Jim, but I want to take a little sidetrack and show you some of the other stuff that came out for the Worm. Around the time Earthworm Jim was coming out, they had this big deal with Playmates that helped fund the game, and they released a bunch of action figures which, as you can tell, have gone through the years of use. Earthworm Jim's chest is starting to turn a little yellowish. Some of the toys are breaking, like this one. His helmet's all like yellowish because I actually went in the pool with him. His arm piece broke, but you know, I don't really care that much. You know, I'm not like some people who wish they had taken better care of their toys, because I really did take a lot of care of these toys. I just used them to their fullest extent when I was a kid. And personally, I prefer that over having kept them in the original packaging. We actually played with them. You know, these are the only toys I've kept from my childhood other than a bag of Ninja Turtle toys in the attic. And what really surprised me was, in 2012, they released a new Earthworm Jim toy. Yeah, Earthworm Jim. Look at him. He looks so much better than the original. All muscular, and this one's all like flabby. And yeah, I know I just said I prefer not to keep toys in their packaging, but as a 20-year-old, I'm not really crazy about playing with toys anymore. It's pretty cool to have seen a new Earthworm Jim toy that come out like years after I was done like buying them. One thing about Earthworm Jim was that in 1999 a game called Clay Fighter 63 and the Third came out, and one of the characters included was Earthworm Jim. I don't even like this game, but I just bought it because I saw Earthworm Jim in a fighting game. Oh hell yeah! So I know this review's gone on for a while and it's completely gone off track, but before I finish I just want to say this game is terrible. In one sentence, this is what you have to do. Collect coins. If you die after collecting 250 coins, which could take a while to collect, you start back to 0. Even if you have 3 lives, the lives are meaningless because even if you die, you go back to the beginning of the stage. And some of the levels are really hard, like pitfalls that you can't even see where you're gonna fall, and you don't even have your little spinny head thingy. So yeah, the last game I want to talk about is Earthworm Jim 3D. Now this game is awful. It stinks. But unfortunately I love it. I only like it because I see it and it takes me back to the year 1999 when I was just a 7-year-old, yeah. But if you're just a casual gamer looking to check out the series, avoid this one. It's like Banjo-Kazooie, just a lot more unforgiving and with worse camera. So there we go. That's the end of Earthworm Jim. I hope you make the right choice when deciding which system you want to buy it for. And yeah, take care. Oh, and the cartoon is amazing as well.